In an interview with Corriere della Sera, Kremlin advisor Suslov voiced the Kremlin's new demands. They are capitulatory to us, to Europe. Putin wants to conclude an agreement with the U.S. without involving Ukraine and Europe. We understand, Europe and Ukraine. This is key for the aggressor. Russia's plans are to withdraw our troops from Donbas. Russia will withdraw its troops from Sumy, Kharkiv, and Dnipro regions. The latter has no enemy, by the way. The front line in other areas remains unchanged. Ukraine does not join NATO. The Kremlin still needs guarantees of not joining the alliance. A prerequisite for a ceasefire is de-NATOization. The final peace agreement should include the demilitarization of Ukraine and federalization. Suslov claims that if Ukraine rejects these proposals, U.S. President Trump will cut off all military aid to Kiev and will ban the sale of weapons for Ukraine to Europe, which will allegedly accelerate our defeat. According to him, the fact that Russia is now ready to talk about a ceasefire is a softening of the Russian position. Donald Trump wants to listen to you a little bit. Ukrainian President Zelensky says that territorial concessions are not a proposal by Trump or Witkoff. This is what Putin really wants, and we are not ready to discuss the issue of territories remotely without sitting at the negotiating table, because this is a matter of our constitution, and these are serious issues that are addressed at the level of leaders. As Zelensky says, it is dangerous to talk about Ukraine without Ukraine. This may be discussed, but it will not be accepted. Zelensky calls the meeting in Alaska as a victory for Putin. Putin did two things to get this victory for himself, because the meeting in the U.S. is a way out of isolation and a postponement of the likely sanctions. Putin needs a photo with the U.S. president to show to his plebs and say, "What a great geopolitician and strategist I am." The ball may be in our court, Zelensky argues. Putin says he's ready for a ceasefire, but wants us to withdraw troops. We won't do that. Then we are supposedly to blame because we don't agree. For Zelensky, the presence of Europe in the negotiations is important because so far no one but Europe has given us security guarantees. We need 2 bilateral and 1 trilateral meeting. The U.S. sees a bilateral meeting between Trump and Putin, followed by a trilateral meeting with Zelensky. And our request is a bilateral meeting between Russia and the U.S., followed by a bilateral meeting between Ukraine and the U.S., and then a trilateral meeting. After the national security advisors met online in the UK, it became clear that what was said on the phone with President Trump and European leaders was probably not the same as what Russia conveyed to the American side. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. How to avoid being eaten? We'll talk with political scientist Petro Leszczuk. Petro, hi, glory to Ukraine, glory to heroes. Don't you think from the numerous publications and statements of our leader and the rhetoric and initiatives coming from the White House, which agreed to the meeting between Trump and Putin that the Russian dictator demanded, that Trump is supposedly correcting Putin's initiatives and encouraging Ukraine to make concessions? How high is this risk after Friday? This is a complicated issue. Everyone, including the president of Ukraine, is talking about the risks of this scenario, so it is obvious that the scenario is realistic. The question is different. What exactly does Trump expect to hear from Putin in this situation? What exactly is he trying to achieve? We don't know yet, so there is a lot of speculation on this topic, including speculation around the Nobel Peace Prize, which is supposedly why Trump wants to make some kind of peace by October. We have no answers to all these questions. Therefore, we do not even have a draft decision or a draft of this decision, what exactly they plan to discuss there. There are leaks about the Russian side's requests, which are inadequate. There is another question: to what extent the President of the U.S. is willing to discuss these requests. That is, the questions themselves, there are no answers. Obviously, based on the information published by representatives of the Trump administration, it seems as if Trump seriously expects that he will meet with Putin and that this will be some kind of breakthrough, and that personal communication will supposedly open up some additional opportunities and thus resolve all issues. Is this really true? There are some doubts, because in any case, the Russian dictator has a lot of experience in influence, a lot of experience in manipulation, and ultimately involvement in relevant international political negotiations. Therefore, it will not be possible to simply induce him to do something, and he may rush to appropriate manipulations and engage in these manipulations. There are risks, which I think are obvious to everyone. Ukraine is now concerned about a consolidated position with the European Union. Therefore, the President of Ukraine is going to Germany to enlist the support of the most economically and politically important state of the European Union in this situation, and accordingly claim a similar consolidated position. There was a publication, for example, in the Italian media about what the Russians wanted from the Americans at this meeting, which was either that the Ukrainians fulfill their absolutely fantastic conditions, or that the United States allegedly commit to not only stopping the supply of weapons to Ukraine, but even stopping the sale of weapons to Ukraine. This is strange in terms of the status of the U.S. as a global player and a world leader. Because if the United States were to ban the sale of weapons to a partner state by its own arms manufacturers, it could open up very unpleasant consequences for this world. Ukraine should emphasize this in its relations with the EU, as it affects also the interests of all U.S. partners. Because if, for example, the United States decides tomorrow that it has reached an agreement with someone, and now we will not sell weapons to our partners, I do not know what the consequences will be.